Sound check. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear friends. My name is Ramazan Jampiyev, and it is my pleasure to welcome you at a regular panel session of Astana International Forum. And the session today is dedicated to the issues of green economy development in Kazakhstan, given new requirements of energy transition. And the name of the session is New Ages for Green Economy Transformation to ensure energy transition in reality. Very rich name, but you cannot overestimate the significance of this concept that was adopted almost 10 years ago in Kazakhstan, the concept of green economy. And this year we have adopted the carbon neutrality strategy. And Kazakhstan is currently moving towards its energy transition. However, there are a lot of challenges that we face, different barriers, and of course, all this implies a wide range of opportunities and perspectives for our country, for future generations. And a great challenge for such an economy which is dependent on natural resources, hydrocarbon fuel, to shift to low carbon or low greenhouse gas emission economy. But this is the agenda that we set, and in a very phased manner, we are moving towards achieving these objectives. And today, with our esteemed speakers, we try to discuss these items, and this session is organized through the support of United Nations Development Program, which is a part of Partnership Action for Green Economy initiative, which joins yet another 4 UN agencies and provides significant support to the government of Kazakhstan in terms of green economy. The format of our session is a discussion, 1 hour and 15 minutes. And in conclusion of our session, we will try to leave some space for the audience to ask questions. So stay tuned, follow our discussions, and we will try to answer the questions that you might have. Well, let me introduce our speakers. Ms. Maya Valcheva, UNITAR, a partnership for action on green economy. Mr. Besingazin Kuanish Salobekovich, Deputy CEO of the Joint Company Institute of Economic Research. Shashkenov Marat Kenjatayevich, economist, UN Resident Coordinator Office in Kazakhstan. Abul Yerlan Kuanisholu, Rector of the Academy of Public Administration under the President of Kazakhstan. And Mr. Kapenov, Chairman of Board of Directors, Association of Renewable Energy Sources, Kazakh Green. Let me give the floor to Ms. Maya Vilcheva for the welcoming remark on behalf of Page Agency.
I'm just going to have a short welcome remarks, and then we can go on with the discussion. So welcome again, dear guests, colleagues, friends, panelists, and attendees. I'm delighted to welcome you all to the side event, which focuses on Kazakhstan's green economic transformation, the remarkable advancement the country has made so far, and the new frontiers for green economic transformation that lie ahead. Before I proceed, I would like to also give my gratitude and compliment to the organizers of the forum, to the President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, to the government and everyone involved, and to our partners from the Economic Research Institute who have been instrumental in putting this event together and bringing us all here today, giving us a chance to discuss. I would also like to briefly comment the funding partners of the Partnership for Action on Green Economy, the European Union, Germany, Sweden, Finland, Norway, Switzerland, and South Korea, some of whose representatives are also here in the room today. And without their continuous support, really a lot of good work could not have been possible, so thank you. Yes, so as Ramazan said, I'm here on behalf of PAGE, which is the Partnership for Action on Green Economy. PAGE mission is to support countries in their economic transformation by putting sustainability and social equity at the heart of economic policy and planning. And PAGE is a one UN initiative. It comprises 5 UN agencies, namely the United Nations Environmental Programme, UNEP, United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, who are really very active partners here in Kazakhstan, the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, the International Labour Organization, ILO, and the United Nations Institute of Training and Research, UNITAR, who I also represent. By combining the expertise and the mandates and networks of the 5 PAGE agencies, we're able to provide collective analytical, technical, and capacity building support to countries to help strengthen the enabling policy conditions, incentives, partnerships, and business practices that catalyze greater public and private investment in resource-efficient technologies, in clean energy, in sustainable infrastructure, and nature-positive economic activities. Since 2013, PAGE has supported 22 countries and also has supported the development of over 100 green economy policies and strategies around the world. In Kazakhstan, we have been working since 2018, and despite the very challenging domestic and international conditions, despite pandemics and various other crises, we have witnessed in that period a remarkable progress in Kazakhstan in terms of strategic and in terms of the strategic and policy commitments that the country has made towards green and socially just and carbon neutral development. So I'm just going to mention a few, but we'll actually discuss them also in more details in the discussion. So in 2021, Kazakhstan adopted the new environmental code, which promotes new and more efficient technologies and standards and norms, and also brought the adoption of the strategic environmental assessment. And those are tools that, when applied, will be applied to the strategic environmental assessment, more specifically, will be applied to all policies and projects in the future. In 2022, Kazakhstan also started the implementation of the 5-year Green Kazakhstan National Project, Jusel Kazakhstan, which features concrete measures, activities, and budgets across 8 thematic areas, and is being implemented at national and sub-regional level. In 2022, the country also reconfirmed its commitment to sustainable development goals by presenting the 2nd voluntary national review at the high-level political forum in New York. Significantly, the review demonstrated how the SDGs are being integrated into budgetary process, which is work also that UNDP supported. Earlier this year, after several years of development, the country adopted the carbon neutrality strategy with the target of achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. And currently, Kazakhstan is also updating another key strategic document, the Green Economy Concept, which will be completed later this year and will feature updated targets and goals and measures across many sectors and thematic areas. At the same time, Kazakhstan is planning also a hydrogen strategy, assessing the impact of carbon border adjustment mechanisms on the economy, looking into opportunities for phasing coal, and improving its emission trading scheme and many, many other things. So at any given time in Kazakhstan, there is a number of activities and events and assessments that are happening at the same time in the area of green economy transformation. And this is really, truly remarkable, and it makes our work and the work of other development partners much easier and enjoyable, so thank you very much for that. However, there is a long road ahead from policy planning and development towards policy implementation and enforcement. So how does this all become a reality? What does this actually mean in practice? And what are the next steps? And what are the resources in terms of finance, human capacities, political capital that are needed to move ahead from policy planning and strategizing and assessing towards realizing the benefits of a green transition. And in short, what are the new frontiers of Kazakhstan's green economic transformation? So those are the points we'll be discussing today with our esteemed panel of speakers. And I would like to welcome them all and thank them again for coming here to share their expertise and experience. And thank you everyone in the audience for coming and joining us. Yes, don't forget to note any questions and queries you might have because we'll have a Q&A session. And without further ado, I'll pass to Ramazan. Спасибо большое. Надеюсь на продуктивность.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward for a very productive discussion during our session.
Very much, Maya, for your welcome remarks. With your presence, we're trying to bring a little bit of gender balance to our panel session today. Thank you very much. Let's move to our discussion part. And I have a brief question to you, Maya. First of all, you was absolutely right when you said that it is a long way ahead, moving from political planning and strategy development to the real implementation. And it's already has been 10 years past since the green economy concept was adopted in Kazakhstan. And the world has changed significantly since 2013. Right now we see more electrical vehicles on the streets. We experiencing digitalization. We have a Kaspi bank in Kazakhstan. So many different changes, and the renewables, we achieved almost 4.5% in Kazakhstan. Of course, all of these trends, they requires the updates of key indicators. And I know that Paige was really involved in this process. And the government right now is discussing a new updated version of the green economy concept. Please share with us what exactly is it about? What news we have in new version of green economy concept?
Yeah, thank you very much, Ramazan. Indeed, the policy processes, they always seem to be catching up with international developments in terms of new international agreements, in terms of technological advancement, and the world is really changing so quickly. Not only 10 years ago, but 2 years ago, it's already quite different from what it used to be. So in terms of policy development and strategy development, really it's a never-ending story. It always requires updating, improving strategies, setting up new goals, moving ahead, and just trying to keep up really with the world. And I think the government of Kazakhstan is doing a great job. We're working with the Ministry of Ecology and National Resources and also Ministry of National Economy. But on the updating the green economy concept, which was first adopted in 2013, and back then it was a very forward-looking advanced document. Nowadays, it's, as you mentioned, a little bit out of date. It was adopted before the SDGs, and there will be new goals, new targets, new indicators related to 8 different thematic areas. Among those, energy supply, energy demand, water management, waste, air quality, biodiversity, eco-education. I think those were all of them. At the same time, it's still a challenging process because we are really constrained by, the organizational context of policy development, because an update of a strategy requires that 50% of it stays the same. So we're struggling a little bit with making sure that we bring in all the new advancement and we make sure that this is a useful document for the country, but in the same time we have this also policy constraint. But we're doing the best we can, and this will still be a better document than what it is right now.
Thank you, Maya.
The concept of green economy, as it was mentioned, it is undergoing revision in terms of key indicators, and the Economic Research Institute is actively involved in this process. And I have a question to you, Mr. Kuanish. Apart from the green economy concept, this year the low-carbon pathway strategy was adopted. These are two very important documents. So, how do you see their interaction? Are there any controversies, or they speak common language, or maybe they reinforce each other? This is question one. And on the other hand, during these 10 years, what we could achieve in terms of implementing the green economy concept? Thank you so much, Ramazan, for this question. Well, first of all, I would like to welcome all these panelists of the audience. As for your question, Ramazan, well, indeed, we have repeatedly mentioned that the concept, back in time, it was a strategy, a green economy strategy, and 10 years ago, it was adopted. And back in time, those were very key, ambitious objectives. Part of those has been already achieved. And after 2013, well, at least one event took place which changed the standard to adopt. Well, it's not about achieving carbon neutrality, but adopting the low emission strategy. This is how the ambitions which countries set grew high. There are higher stakes. That's why there was a need to change the strategies, to update the strategy. Let me also stress that, as we touched upon the Paris Agreement, the global climate policy has two separate things. First is Kyoto Protocol. In a nutshell, every developed country agreed to reduce their GHG emissions by 5%. Countries agreed on this Kyoto Agreement for 8 years, and it was adopted, it was agreed on 2005. In 2016, developed and developing countries adopted the agreement on reducing GHG, and it means that by 2016, every country started understanding the implications of climate change, and Kazakhstan was the first among CIS countries to ratify and agree on Paris Agreement. It was an impetus to develop our national climate policy and raising our bars. That's why we adopted the low-carbon pathway here in Kazakhstan, which tells that by 2060 we should ensure zero emissions, which means that everything that we emit should be consumed. This is only about GHG, greenhouse gases, and it means that we need to transform the whole economic policy. The whole economic development model should be revisited, rethought in terms of low GHG emissions. As for the green economy concept, well, you are right. The green economy as a concept is wider document than the low-carbon pathway strategy, because the low-carbon pathway tells only of the GHG, whereas the green economy concept is a wider concept which covers more pillars. There are 8 in total. As for the novelty, so what's the novelty in the new document that Kazakhstan is designing? First of all, we have to understand that, all in all, not only in Kazakhstan, but globally, the strategic planning system is experiencing changes. It's evolving on a year-by-year basis. And the concept was that we need to link strategic target indicators with the current statistical database. There was a problem with the old version of the concept that some indicators cannot be traced from statistical perspectives, so we could not identify them in the statistics system. So we set indicators for which we cannot collect data. This was a disadvantage, and the structure was reviewed, like what target indicators we have to set, whether they are ambitious enough, are they related to the low-carbon pathway. So these issues were raised, and now we fully revisit all the target indicators of carbon neutrality in green economy concept. The second thing that we have to highlight is the evolving the thinking process throughout society in the public planning. Here we rethought the concept of green economy.
If before, when we were thinking about what is the green economy, we were saying that green economy is just the rational use of the available resources. Now we are moving to a wider understanding. Green economy is not just rational use of the current resources, but their use in the way which will not damage environment. So we are putting the environment to the first front. And reducing the risks of the environmental impacts is the main thing, which includes rational use, reuse of all of the available resources, recycling, and all of this. And this also includes biodiversity, because we have to compensate for those risks. The third important thing is the revision in general of the policy and strategy for the development of the energy sector, which is also part of the carbon neutrality strategy, because this strategy gives you a long-term strategic vision of the sectoral development, including the power sector. And in relation to this carbon neutrality, we understand what indicators we are planning to achieve. But another problem is, what should be the share of the rest? For example, in the old concept, we said it should be 3 to 5%. We've achieved it. But what about 2030, 2040, 2050? Unfortunately, it's a very difficult question. The share of rest in the economy, what should it be? 82% by year 2060, or 50, or 40? Is it related to the carbon neutrality achievement or not? All of this should be discussed, and this is very relevant. Yeah, talking about it, Nurlan will probably not fully agree with you in this regard. Yeah, and when we talk about the approaches that could be optimal for REST development. But in general, it's clear that the question of the energy transition and development of green agenda will have a certain burden on the economy. How much would it cost? And at the same time, it creates some perspectives for the future and opens up some windows of opportunities for the country. And in this regard, I have a question, Mr. Murat, to you. Can you tell us? Okay, green economy, green agenda, energy transition, all of this fussy words. But how much would it cost to us, to such a country like Kazakhstan? And do you see in a perspective, as a representative of the United Nations organization, how do you see the importance of this energy transition for Kazakhstan, and what opportunities it can open up for us, for our country? And while you're thinking about this question, I would like to once again ask Kuanesh, do you believe in achieving carbon neutrality by 2060? Well, we are the developers of the strategy for achieving carbon neutrality. How do you think? Of course, we do believe. And in total, this is a very ambitious target, of course, but only having these ambitious targets will allow us to achieve such results. And what I wanted to note, when I was speaking about the directions, I didn't finish. One of the important directions is the water resources, and as part of the concept of green economy, it's also considered. So now we talk a lot about the deficiency of water. We have problems with transboundary waters. We have problems with internal water resources. There is a forecast that by the middle of the century, Kızıldağ region will completely be out of water, and we will have to relocate people from there. So the concept also considers these risks and gives an understanding of how to solve these problems. As for whether I believe or don't believe, actually now only 2 countries have achieved carbon neutrality in the world. It's Bhutan and Tuvalu, as far as I understand. 2 countries that are not the most energy-intensive countries in terms of their economies, like if we compare it to Kazakhstan, for example. But some countries like Finland, they are putting some targets like 2040, and only Kazakhstan, Ukraine, and China are putting 2060 as a target, and other countries have other years as a target. So in general, it has to be a long-term goal. But with the appropriate international support and with the appropriate resources available, it's quite an achievable result. Thank you very much, Murat. Now the floor is yours. Thank you for your question. Good day, dear colleagues. It's a very interesting question. I would like to first talk about global trends related to the 2030 agenda. First, aspects after the agenda was adopted, we were observing positive trends. For example, we were seeing trends on reductions of child mortality, of extreme poverty. We were also seeing that in the countries with the highest poverty, they had increased number of rests in the general energy balance. But in the latest 4 years, due to the COVID-19 and war in Ukraine and the climate changes, the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals actually slowed down, and I can provide you some examples. For example, only 12 indicators of SDGs are on the right path to be achieved, so we will be able to achieve the results that were announced. On 50% of indicators, the progress slowed down, so the pace that we're having now means that we will not be able to achieve them by 2030. And on 30% of SDG indicators, we are even observing a regression, so it's a negative dynamics. If we take, for example, Northern and Central Asia, according to ESCAP, report on SDG 13, combating climate changes, we are seeing a regression. And Kazakhstan is different in this regards. First of all, Kazakhstan is a leader in Central Asia. We are one of the first countries who announced the target on carbon neutrality achievement and adopted a strategy until 2060. And as it was noted before, the economic transformation and the vision of the economic transformation should be formed by each country separately, and all economy sectors should be involved and integrated under this single target of the economic transformation achievement. And first of all, I'd like to note that in Kazakhstan, we used to have a state program for industrial and innovative development, so focus on industrialization started since 2003. But nevertheless, as of today, we still see that our economy is mainly based on the resources use. It is still very carbon intensive, and I think that in order to implement the strategy for carbon neutrality, we should have a common vision and clear understanding of which sectors we have to develop in the future. So we should have a long-term vision for the development of the economy sectors in Kazakhstan. Secondly, I'd like to mention that as of today, we're experiencing fourth industrial revolution, and in this regard, Kazakhstan is part of the top 30 countries on implementation of public services. But at the same time, we should focus more on the development of the digital infrastructure and development of digitalization of the private sector, which would support the development of the economy in general. As for the investments, it is also listed in the strategy, more than 610 billion USD is required in order to implement the strategy, and 10 billion USD until 2030. At the same time, share of the public sector is less than 4%, and therefore the focus here is on foreign investments and private investments. We can also see the same phenomena in the global agenda. So among developing countries, there are no sufficient investments into SDGs development, and the Secretary General has suggested some additional incentives, and key role will be played here by international financial institutions, National Development Bank as well, which could attract some additional private investments and foreign investments into the country to implement the strategy. Thank you very much, Murat. Indeed, it's very important for the energy transition to create a required legislative regulatory basis where we do have some movements. But second is access to finances, financial resources. And here the huge role will be on the financial institutions to support such a country as Kazakhstan, which is a very important country in the region, to ensure transformation. You mentioned it rightly that Kazakhstan is a leader in the region, but it's one thing to become a leader, but the second important thing is to stay a leader. And in order to identify clear targets, we need to start with some very particular steps. And I remember clearly year 2012 when the concept was being developed. I participated in some working groups representing the oil and gas sector and electricity sector and energy sector. And at that time, I think not many people believed in the development of the RESP development prospects. But now, after 10 years, we see that probably out of the whole other sectors which were covered by the green economy concept, the most successful was the renewables direction. And as of today, if we are talking about the strategy for carbon neutrality, we see that the most economically rational and practically implementable projects are the projects in the field of energy efficiency and projects in the field of renewables. That's why, Nurlan, this question is to you about the renewables. Where are we standing now? What prospects do we have in the future, and what barriers we have? What do we need to do in order to go through these bottlenecks and to have these appropriate conditions to accelerate renewables development? Many thanks, Ramazan, for this question. I'm very glad to greet and welcome all of the participants of today's forum. Thank you for coming to listen to this very interesting topic. RES are indeed developing gradually and progressively for more than 10 years, since 2014, since we have started with the fixed tariffs. We experienced a huge growth. If before we didn't have a single, now we have 130 power plants with RES. It's 2.5 megawatts of the installed capacity, and it's 4.5% of the total installed capacity in the country. Why do we have to develop renewable energy capacity in the country? Dear listeners, we are currently located in the country. We breathe some air. We think that we have a clean air, but no, that's not true. And according to latest data, Astana is taking the first place on the most polluted air. And then we are surprised why our children have so many allergies, so many oncology diseases, so many respiratory diseases and lung diseases. But this is all related to the air quality. And why do we have such air quality? Do we have any industrial productions here and industrial facilities? No, it's only because of the coal generation. 70% of all emissions in the country is coal generation. That's why we are talking about replacing coal generation with cleaner energy sources in our agenda. And this is why Mr. Tokayev last year had increased the indicator that we had previously in the green economy concept, which we mentioned today, which was initially approved by the first president in 2005. from 10% to 15%. But Ramazan, you mentioned it absolutely rightly that we do still have barriers. These are the limitations of our energy system, because during these 30 years, our energy system has completely degraded. It's completely worn out, and we have a lot of disbalances on the overflows from Russian Federation. And if Russian Federation will stop helping us to balance the system, we will go back to the 90s in terms of how would the energy sector look. If previously we only had the balancing and flexibility problems, now we also have problems with generation because we don't have enough energy, and it's clear that we have to construct new power plants. And what should these new power plants be like? We need to think about it. The government is now aiming to develop 4 gigawatts of the new capacities of coal generation, but it's a step back. We have already polluted everything possible. This was done by the generation of our parents and our generation. In these latest years, due to coal generation, we have polluted everything we could have polluted, but now we need to think how to move further. The barrier for renewables development is that it's not stable because it's leading to instabilities, and Kazakhstan was always considered as the stabilizing factor because we had cheap coal, and that's why during the Soviet times they decided that Kazakhstan would be the place for coal generation, and other Central Asian countries would be the ones for flexible capacities for example, hydro generation. That's why we are in some sort of trace here in Kazakhstan, but we have to develop alternative generation, maybe gas generation at least in this transition period. And how do you think, Mr. Nurlan, in addition to your thesis that you mentioned, maybe we should go refer back to Soviet times and look at the perspectives of the regional energy cooperation, but replace coal generation, of course, with RES generation and balance with the flexible capacities with large hydros in the neighboring countries. Is there any possibility in such approach? Yes, indeed, Ramazan. And there is a great example in Europe. There is a common operator, Nord Pool, which includes Denmark, Norway, UK, and other countries. And they help each other to balance, because if we have wind in one area, for example, it starts here and ends here, and other countries have other resources, and this transnational overflows is one of the opportunities to go over these imbalances, but at the same time there are accumulation systems, there is gas generation. But what's the problem in all of this? This is about tariffs. Dear participants, please remember that in Kazakhstan we have the cheapest tariffs in the world. Maybe we are happy about it because it's cheap for population, but this is what is preventing the development of the clean energy. And first of all, the new generation, clean generation, will lead to growth of tariffs. That's true, but we have to think about the health of population. This is what we need to put on the scales compared to the current economic situation. And I want to add as well that we need to consider incomes of population and profits of business, because now these are preventing the government to adopt significant steps in terms of clean energy development. So, of course, we have these big steps already on adopting the strategy for carbon neutrality. We understand what we want to achieve, how we want to achieve it, but now we need to develop a strategy with the Ministry of Energy and with the market on how to develop the electrical energy market. So we have to understand how the strategy should become part of the economical model. And when we are provided by the examples of Germany or Denmark or other countries, we forget one key factor here. If today we're paying 15 tenge per kilowatt hour, in those countries they pay 200 tenge per kilowatt hour. And I say, of course, even if we will pay half of that, then we will achieve carbon neutrality not in 2060 but in 2045, the indicators in the strategy. Well, the question of tariffs is, of course, very sensitive, and it's a barrier, not just for the development of RES, but for the introduction of new technologies in general, because the questions of economic rationality and feasibility and financial modeling, this is what affecting our economy. But when we consider these tariffs, of course, we need to think about the social factor and the profitability and incomes of population. We have several times discussed the questions of the development of RES in Kazakhstan, and recently we had in Burabay a very big festival on RES, Kazakh Green Fest.
Second time. So just share the highlights of the event, because those were very intensive discussions by all stakeholders and market players, including developers, consumers, state authorities, investors, both domestic and international. So what we need to do in order to make this sector rapidly developing. We discussed the mega projects, large-scale projects like gigawatt and plus with the government and as part of this forum. But we do have the small-scale renewables, which are unfortunately, underdeveloped yet. So in rural areas, you cannot see many solar panels or rooftop solar. Maybe some financial regulations should be, incorporated. I mean, very high-level highlights. Well, as part of our festival, we just talked to the 400 market players. We designed the charter that is addressed to the government of Kazakhstan, and you can find the text in the website of the festival. And I recommend to watch a little movie, feature movie, for 12 minutes about coal-fired generation in Kazakhstan. So what are the future perspectives and what we can change? So you can see the link in the social media. As for low-scale renewables, as an association, we can see good potential for low-scale generation, like 1 to 2 gigawatt by family and on a family level. And this has been in place for the last 3 years together with UNDP, but we cannot push it down to the government. So what we propose with UNDP, to have some preferences, some benefits for the farmers, for the individuals, for households, for small businesses, so that we could install this rooftop panels and generate the electricity. But if we install these rooftop panels without preferences, I pay 15 tenge for kilowatt hour. And in order to pay this off, it will take future generation. And the electricity is so cheap that we would rather just plug in and use it. And we want to make it easier for the households to change the supplier, so that avoid going to different offices, and then provide some subsidies. Maybe it could be through a higher rate. For instance, you use your electricity that you generate and then sell the excess to the energy companies. And this is how the low-scale renewables would grow. And we push this idea forward, and we are looking forward that the government would accept this idea positively. Well, we hope that these amendments to the law on renewables would be accepted. Well, dear colleagues, as you know, last few days are very busy with different fora in Astana, and at every platform we raise the decarbonization high in the agenda. And yesterday we met and shared the opinions with businesses, with enterprises, as it pertains to the zero carbon development or reducing the greenhouse gases. And the highlight was to set on a national scale a very ambitious objective, which are rather difficult to achieve. And this could be achieved only when and if this is not only for the ecologists, but on a community level. This is where we need to raise awareness, improving communication, building skills and competences for the government authorities, for those individuals responsible for the implementation of these climate policies, reducing greenhouse gases, pollutants, environmental regulation, and so on and so forth. And I have a question to Mr. Yerlan, as a rector of the Academy of Public Administration. So do you have this agenda in retraining courses of the Academy of Public Administration, or do you plan, or you have something ongoing? Thank you so much. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me for this panel session. Let me just brief you on the Academy about the scales and objectives that we set. The Academy of Public Administration under the President of Kazakhstan has several mandates. It's a special educational institution which is targeting the development of skills for the civil servants on specific matters. And our key objective is to help make the state personnel more professional. And the topic today is also relevant for our academy, because the civil servant has a clear job to do, a common objective to improve the well-being and prosperity of community, quality of life, living standards, creating jobs, and so on and so forth. At this very stage, there could be a lot of questions how to do this without jeopardizing other policies which government accepts or ratifies, and so on. Let me stress that the civil servant, overall in the government, there are intergovernmental communication, particular specialization, and the agenda for today pushes civil servants to reconsider their approaches in decision-making process, like a simple question: food supply. Whether we want it or not, we feel the climate change or creating jobs, which is expressly lead to energy deficiency. Well, again, it refers to the source of energy. So the civil servant is involved in this high-level political agenda, and our job as an academy to offer this platform, invite experts so that the trainees could ask questions and have better understanding. Well, the academy has been operational for many years. We work together with UNPAGE, with UNDP, and we have several projects on Nexus, development and training of civil servants in Kazakhstan and beyond, overall in Central Asia, on this particular topic, like interaction, communication. And we will launch another project, Erasmus+. This would cover 11 universities and 5 centers of Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Eastern Europe, also related to water supply, energy security, and so on. Moreover, on the master and PhD students, which Academy is offering, we have such majorings like urban development, sustainable regional development, under which the civil servants can deepen their knowledge and go into research. I wouldn't say that this is enough. However, our presence here today for this particular session, for this particular platform, confirms the interest, and this is why I kindly invite the stakeholders, the interested experts, start cooperation with us or continue cooperation with us. Our global job is to achieve strategic objectives that the president has mandated to us, and every agency, every Akimat is working to achieve this objective. It means that every civil servant is oriented to achieve this target. Well, thank you so much. Indeed, this is a very relevant issue, and I'm pleased to hear that the Academy of Public Administration is paying due focus on this. Of course, we need to more develop on the communication and raising awareness, not only from the declaration on the climate change, but from the perspective of risks, i.e., how this would affect the development of the country, because we hear about climate change from every corner, but how this could affect the development of the country in real terms would require some studies, some research. And I have a question both to Marat and Kuanish again. Marat, just give me a hint. Like 5 years ago, the integrated framework on coordination between the state authorities on SDG development was established in Kazakhstan. Is this still operational? I remember there were government authorities involved with 5 groups of people, partnership, planet, and so on and so forth. Like 5 P groups were established where every state authority was responsible for a particular pillar. I remember how vividly this was developing. I just wonder if it's still in place. And in parallel, I have a question to you, Kuanish. From the perspective of Economic Research Institute as the main developer of the carbon neutrality strategy development, so do you have any analysis of climate risks and how they would tell on the economic sustainability of the country? Why I'm asking the question? To set a target, develop a strategy, tentatively assess how this could be achieved, this is a clear picture. I mean, this is important. However, from the other perspective, like on the reverse side, like finding the high-risk sectors of economy which are more exposed to climate change. I mean, here in Kazakhstan, based on the economic structure of our country and based on the modeling the development outcomes. So when we put things together like targeting and risks that we may have, only then it would be easier or maybe more efficient to plan specific steps, activities, projects on achieving carbon neutrality by 2060. So this is what's going on currently on the government level, I mean, in terms of roadmap. Maybe a bit long question, but still. Last year, Kazakhstan celebrated 30 years of joining United Nations family, and the first decade of independence, UN agencies were targeting humanitarian support, development of infrastructure, because the poverty level back in time was almost 47%. At this moment, Kazakhstan is among countries with income, middle-income countries. And currently, the UN agencies are helping Kazakhstan in designing policies and program documents. For instance, carbon neutrality pathway strategy that was discussed, social code, the law on prevention of human trafficking. So this is how UN agencies are helping us these days. As for the strategic priorities, Kazakhstan and UN has signed the SDG implementation project by 2025, and this framework is targeting the development of human capital, building the capacity of institutions, including the support to resilient, sustainable, and inclusive economic development in our country. And let me also stress that Kazakhstan and UN agencies work together on different projects. And Kazakhstan has the SDG Coordination Council. Last year, the chair of the Coordination Council, it was on the level of the Deputy Prime Minister. Yes, that's what I'm asking you about. So Prime Minister is the chair of this Coordination Council, and this is where we can see that Kazakhstan has a clear vision that SDG is the key priority with engaging every ministry in implementing these SDGs and pillars, 5P. Then the Economic Research Institute is the secretariat for this Coordination Council. Yes. So it seems that every path goes to the Economic Research Institute. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you. Just very briefly on risks and what's next. Well, I think that the government overall understands the implication of climatic risks on the state policy. This is very important because there are a lot of strategic plans, concepts, and so on. And if we do not take the climatic risk into account, we may encounter very heavy implications of this. So we have to carefully assess how the climate risks affect the economic development. And we have EA3KZ model, 3EE, environment, ecology, and economy, 3E. And this model helps to adapt the measures for economic development. So what is the climate change from the economic perspective? Well, we have basic understanding that climate change would lead to increase of temperature. This seems to be good for Kazakhstan because we have cold winters, but this is wrong. Extreme events, extreme weather events would be more frequent, like desertification, heat waves, tsunami, dust storms. So this would be more frequent, including drought, and this would negatively affect the economic development. We have a tool that allows to assess all these negativities. We know how frequent is the drought. For instance, last year, because of electricity outage, 7% of gross output was lost by the SMEs because of the climate implications, and this results in loss of income. Business is not sustainable. We have data, and some of the things it's rather difficult to assess. There are no clearly collected data on extreme weather conditions. So we try to pull information from mass media, from newspapers, on every event that took place in Kazakhstan, like landslides, earthquakes, wildfires, and we try to assess how this resulted in economic loss. About 600 billion of GDP was lost. Well, this seems to be a very little number, and it's top of an iceberg. We do not know the real losses, and we could not take those into account. We, for instance, conditionally know that having the temperature increase in our area there is like a mantra, 1.5 degree by Celsius. We shouldn't have increased more than 1.5. For Kazakhstan, it would be 3.5. But this would result in 50% of the winter crops. But this could result in good yield for the sunflower growth. So this is what we should know and then incorporate into the economic planning and thus improving the resilience of economic system. Right. So what's next? Correct. Yeah. Well, there is a document which is called the Nationally Developed Contribution, where the Ministry of Ecology is responsible for. And the resolution of the government improved these NDCs. A roadmap would follow, and I wish best of luck to our colleagues from the Ministry of Ecology. Apart from that, there is understanding with the decision makers that the low carbon development should be implemented. And this is where we work with the donors, IFIs, ADB, UNDP, and others, in order to pool all these efforts and design a document with long-term vision for the reduction of greenhouse gases. When we say decarbonization, many state authorities or like community have a perception that by reducing the GHG, we impede the economic development. But on the other hand, it opens up new opportunities. If we increase tariffs for heat and electricity, it would be more beneficial for insulating our buildings better. And this would result in higher demand for insulation materials, and businesses will start producing these insulation materials. New jobs will be created where people can work and receive salary. Another benefit, some research and businesses would go for R&D to design new insulation materials, like brick with better insulation properties, and this would result in more investments. This has so many opportunities for another big stride in terms of research for the benefit of development and raising more investment. And from this perspective, the picture is absolutely different.
So that's why I asked this question, whether the works are being conducted in terms of the financial risks and their impact on the financial stability of the economy. Yeah, that's why I'm saying there is such a tool under which we are reporting to the government. Yeah, and if we recalculate it or transfer it all into numbers, into money, I think it will be easier to talk with public bodies. Because when we say we need to reduce 80 million tons of CO2, not everyone understands whether it's a lot or not a lot. Yeah, and there is such an example from the point of view of money and material things. 1 megawatt hour of the RES generation establishes 7 job places, while the same generation on coal provides 3 only job places. So it's a big difference. So 1 megawatt hour has higher capacity on providing new jobs compared to coal generation. Yeah, that would be nice to see how these calculations are made. With that, I'm suggesting that we will stop the discussion when we now have 5 to 7 minutes for the questions from the audience. Please introduce yourself if you're asking a question, and say who you're addressing the question to. Do we have microphones in the room? Good day. Thank you. My name is Jaksabayeva Nurlayem. I am the researcher of the public policy in Nazarbayev University. I'm doing my research on circular economy. My question is probably to you, Kuanish, as a representative of the Economic Research Institute. You said that the concept of the green economy is being revised now, and in general, we know that the main focus of our country, economic focus, is diversification of the economy, and I'd like to know what is the role of the small and medium enterprise in green economy, and are there any measures that are being developed in the new updated concept on supporting the green development of the small and medium enterprises, and what are the potential conditions that we can create to make SMEs more sustainable, and so that they would be more interested in stepping into the circular economy? Thank you for your question. First of all, probably based on this stable, sustainable development of any economy, it's usually based on small business. So small business is important for creating jobs, and medium is more for production, for accumulating resources, for directing them to the growth. For the policy development, there are very clear criteria in Kazakhstan. So we have to lead the share of SMEs in the economy up to 40%, and with small business, 40%, with medium business, 15%. Talking about the circular economy in general, we don't have particular indicators or targets like how much should be in circular economy, how much should be in the creative economy, and so on. But in general, my understanding is that the main condition for such national policy is also supporting small and medium enterprises in their sustainable development. And there currently we have great tools under DAMU, which also help to move to green growth. They have subsidies for energy efficiency, for RES. There are some grant resources available. In general, government understands that we have to develop this direction. And you say it absolutely right, that the green economy concept takes the key position for the government. And my personal understanding is that it should provide very clear tools for supporting SMEs. This could be small capacities, for example, some processing, reprocessing, recycling, like plastic recycling, for example, capacities. So nowadays, I think it's easier to actually attract small business into such activities. Thank you very much. Any more questions? Good day. My name is Zhana. I am representing Bank of China. My question is to Mr. Marat, probably. You said that we have to attract foreign investors, also second-tier banks, also national bank. But my question here is, what are the benefits for the business and industry the green economy is offering for the investors? So what are these benefits for the investors that are planning to work in this direction? Marat, to the maximum extent, briefly, as possible, please. When we talk about moving to green economy, first of all, we have to decrease number of resource-based or commodities-based economy sectors and diversify into the high added value sectors. And in this regard, investments into such key sectors as renewable energy sources, the food systems, also sectors related to the fourth industrial revolution have a key role. And as of today, the national development banks, they can give an additional impetus and increase liquidity by attracting private investments. That means if we see that the National Development Bank is entering such projects in green economy, it will be like a signal, like an indicator for private investors, for foreign investors to invest into those areas. Thank you very much, Murat. While the microphone is moved to the next person, I will add probably from my side, it is very important to ensure financing for some projects. So far, we don't have any particular incentives. So far, is for the investors. It's just like, for example, own ESG targets, PR for the company, like good reputation. And in order to get strengthened as a financial institute, increase financial flows, or help to implement certain separate financial programs, we unfortunately do not have it yet from the government. Good day. Thank you. It was very interesting. My name is Sandugash. I'm now I want to speak as a general population representative. So talking about the tariffs, it's a painful issue. And in Kazakhstan, we have a huge gap between the poor ones and the rich ones. And in the end, the rich ones, they find some approaches to pay less. And actually, the burden will then fall on the poor population. And another thing I want to say that we do find finances for some image projects. So the government finds finances when it's needed for some high-level image events for the country or projects. But if we reduce those projects but send more money for such projects, that would be great. So, for example, when we talked about taxes for tobacco and alcohol, excise taxes, some additional laws, draft laws were proposed on financing of the foreigners. For example, foreign players in our teams, sports teams like football teams, they are paid much higher than the local ones. And these projects are not supported, but usually the image ones are supported. So maybe there is a way to somehow prioritize and find resources for such more important projects for the country. The question is probably to Bojan or Kuanish. Yeah, well, the question is quite clear, but probably next time we will ask the organizers to invite a representative from the parliament, maybe MPs, representatives of the financial sector, like Ministry of Finance or Committee for State Revenues, those who are involved or can possibly be involved in the reforms, like tax reforms, financial reforms. Here, I don't think that speakers here can respond anything. Dear colleagues, if you want to say something, you can. Yeah, just one hypothesis about the tariffs and impact of tariffs on poor and rich population. It's not in the context to somehow substantiate the need to increase the tariff, but it's very abstractly on how the tariffs impact on poor and rich. Low tariffs are, first of all, more beneficial for the rich ones because you have a bigger house, you have more electrical devices, you have, I don't know, Tesla, air conditioners, and so on. So that means the richer people will lose more from higher tariffs. The poor layers of population can be supported on a targeted basis, like targeted support, and there are such potential tools. And with the fuel subsidies in the economies that can be used, for example, and this saved amounts, they can be sent for targeted support of poor population that suffer the most in the tariffs increase. So we can consider such opportunities as well. And we give an opportunity for one last question, if there is one. Okay, if there are no questions, then on this note, let me thank our distinguished speakers for their participation, for sharing their time. I'd like to thank all of our delegates, participants, for staying until the end of the session. And I'd like to congratulate each of us with the successful start of the Astana International Forum, with the past International Environmental Day, the Day of the Ecologist, and I would like to wish you a successful future. bright future.